Yes, so this is basically what we actually need to be able to look at. I think we start with the first aspect that I want to be able to look today, the issue of climate change. So it's important to be able to look at the issue of climate change and how it basically affects or rather impacts on wash. So it's good. I think by now everybody is simply aware of the fact that climate change is a reality, and it's something that we definitely have to be able to live with. There's nothing short of dealing with the issue of climate change because of human activities. There's been a lot of impact uh, on the different layers that surround the earth, and as a result then we have been able to live with the whole significant impact of climate change. So now one is that we have basically been able to have significant raises in temperature, and one of the things that experts have actually been able to document is an average of about 0.74 degrees Celsius within the past century. So temperatures have actually been able to flare up up to that level, and it's very important to make sure that we actually are able to look at that. We have been able to notice increases of 0.5 to 2 degrees Celsius by 2030, and also increases of about 1 degree Celsius to 7 degrees Celsius by 2070. That's what we are projecting. That we might be able to have some temperature increases to that level by 2070, and this is worrisome because you can expect that this will come with a lot of human interruptions um, in their way of life. Again, also the other thing that also raises a concern is the fact that the global average atmospheric carbon dioxide in 2019 alone was actually 409.8 parts per million of CO2 equivalent. This is quite high, and it has been actually been increasing significantly because the last global average atmospheric carbon dioxide we had in 2011 was actually in the range of 250 parts per million. So you can imagine in 2019, if we are hitting a 409.8, that means that that is very high, and we still expect even today, 2021, that should be higher than 409.8 parts per million. And the significant area of worry today is the fact that the carbon dioxide levels today are basically higher than at any point in at least the past 800,000 years ago. So whatever we are getting today is actually higher than what we have been able to experience in the last 800,000 years ago. And the evidence of changes in sea levels, in Arctic temperatures, and also in sea ice is something that we have been able to see. Of course, we know that there's been a rising sea level. In fact, some of the projections that have been done is the current islands that we know currently would actually be able to change at some point, and it is important to recognize that this is as a result of raising sea levels. But this is just the evidence. We would really want to see now, with the impact of these significant changes in climate change evidence, some of the things that we might actually want to be able to see is uh, is how does this impact some of the wash interventions that we actually do, and that's the interest that we have, even as we look at some of these things as much as possible. Now, the other thing that we have also been able to see, these are basically things that have actually been observed as a result of climate change. Some of these impacts have actually been felt. And one of it is what we are calling the fact that the grassland and the forest areas have basically been able to decline by 7% to 26% respectively. When you look at a place like Indonesia, data over the 50-year period has actually been showing decreasing trends in December, January rainfall in parts of Papua, Sumatra, and also Kalimantan Islands, and also increasing trends in rainfall in most of Java and Bali. This is something that has actually been recorded in Indonesia. So we are talking about some of the things that we have actually been able to see very big. In the Philippines, one of the things that we have also been able to observe is the average temperature has actually also been able to increase by 0.648 degrees Celsius from 1951 to 2010. And the rate of this increase for nighttime temperature is actually 3 times than the daytime temperature increase. And this is worrisome because that means average temperature is basically rising because of the change in climate. And the other thing is also in Vietnam, we have also been able to observe, and also we've gotten reports that the sea level has actually been able to increase by 9 centimeters in the past 30 years. And again, also it has managed to increase, it will actually be able to increase by 1 meter by 2100. This is something that I will be looking at in the 21st in the 21st century. What are some of the projected impacts? I think the maps are able to summarize this very well. Some of the projected impacts that we are likely to see, like for instance, I've spoken about the rising sea levels, and you can see in the blue areas where there's been reports of rising sea levels. You can see from the map some areas in Vietnam, some areas in Thailand, some areas in Cambodia, some areas, parts of Indonesia, parts of Malaysia. We have been able to see some of these increasing temperatures. And again, also there's been increase in extremely hot days virtually. And this means having extremely hot days during the day. And also the other thing that has been also been recognized is the fact that this sea level rises that we are that are continuing are definitely going to be able to lead to flooding. And it's something that would also be very worrying when you have an increase of these sea levels. It will definitely be able to lead to flooding. Then again, also the heat waves are likely to increase in length and also in frequency and also intensity. Most of you remember the heat waves that were there sometimes back in Australia. I'm sure most of you watched that in the news. There were some very heavy heat waves that were very long. So, and it is important to make sure that we are able to look at some of those increase in the heat waves. And one of the things that you can actually see there is the multiple climate hazard index, and you are able to see is being shown there from 0 all the way to 1. So the areas that you find colored red, they're likely to be facing very high levels of climate hazards. And you can see like the Philippines is almost fully covered red. So it tells you the impact that they have from climate change. Some zones are a bit yellow, like good portion of Indonesia is actually well yellow. And this basically points to you the kind of challenges that we have, such that if we were actually to be able to look at how to deal with these projected impacts, then this would be something that would be very critical to be able to look at. Now, one of the things that we also need to be able to understand is that because of some of these problems, then there is some potential wash-related impacts of climate change. And one of the most significant areas that will be affected is natural resources, where we definitely are able to have increased precipitation intensity and variability, with the risk of flooding and drought. So it's important to make sure that we are able to look at that increase of precipitation intensity and variability, with risk of flooding and drought. And then also there's also the higher risk of water pollution and disease from elevated water temperatures. And then again, also there is also a lot of saline nutrition of coastal aquifers based on the rise in sea levels as well. So there's been also a lot of intrusion in some of these coastal aquifers due to the rise in the sea levels. Then again, also the rising levels of groundwater pollution, which is something that we have also been able to see in specific instances. So there's a lot of increase in that. And then again, also infrastructure, that is, we need to be able to have greater investment in in flood protection. We also need to make sure that we are able to have storage capacity. We need also to have supply and treatment systems. And it's therefore very important to make sure that there's continuous restriction. There's continuous reconstruction of the damaged wash infrastructure. Then again, also need also to be able to look on how to be able to supply wash services to new mobile populations. So we have to get concerned on how we will be able to supply wash services to new mobile populations. Then again, also there's been demand. There's been increased and unsustainable use of surface and groundwater resources. So, and this is driven because of the population increases. So the population, as this population increases. Then again, also the issue of increased competition between wash and agriculture is also very, very critical, where there's been some increased competition between wash and agriculture, and that's something that we need to be able to see as. And then again, also the issue of access has also been a challenge because of multiplication of livelihood problems as a result of rapid climatic change. So it's important to be able to see that kind of issue. So and livelihood problems are getting complicated as a result of climatic change, because people don't have their previous means of farming are not sustainable anymore because of changed climate change as much as possible. And so it's very, very important to be able to look at that. And then again, also possible failure of regulatory systems and legislation that is normally aimed at protecting the rights of individuals or community so that they can actually be able to access water for multiple uses. So I think again, now you have also been very, very observant in your own local context, and I basically just want two people to mention some impact of climate change that they have actually been able to observe in their own country. So if you have something.
Okay, thank you. In terms of climate change in Southern Africa, most of the things that have really happened to do with reduced precipitation. We've had intermittent droughts as a result of climate change. And our rainfall patterns have actually changed. We used to have longer rainfall periods, but for now, they are very short. As a result, most of the countries rely on rain-fed agriculture. So at this time, if rains are low, it means that the crops usually suffer. As a result, that leads to droughts. So that's an example that comes to mind when we talk of climate change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's very, very true because of that kind of the fact that certain plants can do well because of farming, then that has a specific impact to the farmers and also to the food basket of a country. And that is something that, as Cynthia says, has been observed in that side of Southern Africa. But then again, I'm sure it has also been observed in different places as well. So that's very, very for being able to mention that. What about Henry, Laura? Something you have noted that is an impact of climate change in South Sudan?
Yeah, what I've observed in terms of climate change, recently we observed in some of the country a lot of flooding, which was occurred. And also this year we have also observed change in rain patterns. Normally our farmers start, the rain start in April, and this year it has pushed up to July now. So farmers actually are a bit confused, and they are now starting planting their crops this month instead of April.
Let's just be able to proceed with what we're supposed to look at. And now I also wanted to share with you just a graph that basically shows access to water and sanitation in some countries here in the East Asia Pacific region. And one of the things that you will actually be able to see is that some nations basically have very low levels of improved water supply, as you can see. Countries such as Papua New Guinea basically have very low water supply. And even the thing is that some of the countries basically are able to have improved sanitation, and it's almost working out well together with improved water supply. But the issue of an improved sanitation is also high in certain countries such as Papua New Guinea, and also the practices of open defecation, which is something that we want to get rid of as the world, ensuring that we will not be able to have open defecation being practiced. And so that's something that we want to be able to take. So basically having very high levels of open defecation. And good example there is you can see in Timor. Timor is very actually it's very high. Cambodia is even the highest. It's very important, particularly for some of these areas that have open defecation. It's always good to make sure that they are looked in so that that does not actually contribute to that particular issue. And, trying to see how that can actually be looked at. So the issue of access to water and sanitation really becomes quite critical to make sure that we are able to look at that as much as possible. So it's very critical to be able to see that. Basically is to be able to look at some of this picture here, just to summarize the kind of wash solutions that will actually be required to reduce risk and also build resilience. So when you talk about increasing sea levels and the fact that some places that were islands will actually be flooded, I think if you look at that, you can basically be able to see the kind of impact that we are talking about. So this is what exactly we were meaning when we say that definitely there will be there'll actually be some impacts on the solutions that we will actually need to be able to reduce risk and also be able to build resilience. Now, in terms of building resilience for the wash sector, we need to look at a number of things that we actually need to be able to look at, and some of those things that would actually be able to look at is simply being able to have an iterative process of monitoring, of research, of evaluation, of learning and innovation, so that we are able to reduce risk and also promote what we are referring to as adaptive management. Then again, also, it's good also to make sure that we're able to build knowledge through risk assessment and also scenario building. That's one of the things that we might actually be able to do in the wash sector. Then again, also, we need to be able to have a capability to be able to translate knowledge into plans, into strategies, into policies, into programs that are simply supported by monitoring and information management systems as much as possible. So it's very good to be concerned about that. And then again, also, it is very critical to ensure that we have small measures that are basically become the starting points for addressing the projected threats as much as possible. So some of the adaptation approaches that we have actually been forced to be able to embrace basically look as this. So one is the increase in the need to be able to do rainwater harvesting, doing what we call aquifer recharge, where you're able to create some instead of allowing all water to pass through the land and go all the way to the rivers and the lakes, you're able to create some open basins that allow the aquifers to ensure that excuse me, they're able to recharge as expected. Then again, also is to construct small multi-purpose dams and also ensure that you are able to have what we call subsurface dams, where we are able to create some of those subsurface dams, and also ensuring that we can actually be able to have ponds. So I just want to turn your attention now to the issue of borehole development and rehabilitation. It's something that we may have to be able to look at, the issue of borehole development and rehabilitation. And it's good to make sure that we are able to look at that. Now, when it comes to borehole rehabilitation of dug or drilled boreholes, it actually becomes necessary if the operating boreholes basically lack in providing adequate water quality or quantity, as the borehole basically becomes contaminated or clogged through the natural process or in consequence of emergencies such as floods or seawater intrusion. Because we are getting a lot of seawater intrusion into coastal aquifers, and as a result, then we need to be able to rehabilitate some of those wells that we are able to have. So it's very, very important to be able to look at that. And so this basically involves the cleaning and also the disinfection of borehole, and also sometimes the application of borehole development procedures. And so it's always good to ensure that we are able to have the application of borehole development procedures as much as possible, because from the graphic below, you can see that a borehole will be constructed at some point. Then there will be use of the borehole or the well at some point. Then at some point also, we will also realize that as a result of contamination or emergency or some abrasion, then we can be able to look at the whole issue of rehabilitation of the borehole, and also we can also be able to look at after rehabilitation, can the borehole or the well actually be used again. So those are some of the things that we are able to see. But definitely there are certain basic design principles in terms of improving the borehole yield right after construction. So that's something that we can always be able to do. And the borehole drilling procedures after the hydraulic in the vicinity of the borehole, the fines and the drilling fluid additives originating from the drilling process normally remain in the borehole, and subsequently they are actually able to block they're actually able to block the pores that simply surround the aquifer. And so you are able to see some of those challenges as indicated. So it's very, very important for us to be able to ensure that we are able to see some of those issues. And so the borehole development techniques basically aim to be able to improve the fines, that is the mud cake, and also ensure that we are able to consolidate the gravel pack as expected. This basically results in higher yield and less sand intrusion. And so it's very, very important to make sure that we're able to look at that. And there are certain common borehole development techniques that are basically used, and all of them basically lead to high yield or high filter capacity or less sand intrusion. So they are basically some three common borehole development techniques. One of it is what we call over pumping. That is ensuring that you're able to pump the well in a very high rate than usually will be the case. So that's something that we are able to deal with in terms of over pumping, or again, also you can be able to have something that we are able to refer to as surging, where you're able to move a surge block up and down the well, and the water will actually be forced into and out of the aquifer, and ensuring that we are also able to mobilize the fines as much as possible. Then again, also the what we call jetting, and jetting is basically the injection of high pressure air or water through the screen, so that you can be able to remove the fines and the drilling fluids. Now, again, let's just look at why is it necessary to make sure that we are able to do borehole rehabilitation as opposed to borehole development. And one of the things that basically advises us on whether to do borehole rehabilitation or borehole development is, do we have a situation of contamination? Do we have a situation of emergency, like some certain humanitarian emergency happening in a particular place? And so as a result, you can be able to consider whether you need to be able to do rehabilitation or development of the borehole. And those are some of the things that basically help us to be able to see whether we can actually be able to work with rehabilitation, or basically be able to work with borehole development. So before rehabilitation, rehabilitating boreholes, it is always good to make sure that we are able to check whether rehabilitation is more economic than the construction of a new borehole. And this basically includes the necessary equipment and related costs. Some of the factors that basically determine the costs of some of these interventions will be as follows. So one of the things that we'll be looking at is the ground formation for where the borehole is to be drilled. So that really informs really what will be the cost based on the ground floor. It's a highly rocky place, then of course the cost will be higher. Highly sandy area, then the cost will definitely be able to be very, very easy to be able to work with. Again, also the issue of the construction or the drilling method that will actually be able to be used. So what kind of drilling method do we actually need to be able to use? That also comes a critical factor to be able to look at. So the construction or the drilling method that essentially needs to be used. So again, another thing that also particularly leads us to borehole rehabilitation is when you are able to look at what is causing the reduced flow of the borehole. Now, borehole rehabilitation in emergency situations normally is brought about because of certain catastrophes or certain crises that will actually be able to happen. And I think we have been able to list some of those crises that could actually be able to take place, so that we can be able to have instances of water rehabilitation as expected. So some of those would include things like tsunamis, if tsunamis actually happen, things like storms, then thirdly, things like floods, then fourthly, things like earthquakes. These are some of the things that would actually be able to try borehole rehabilitation in emergency situations. And contamination of these wells due to some of these emergencies will require immediate well rehabilitation and measures that include well disinfection. So this will normally require immediate borehole rehabilitation measures, which include borehole disinfection as well. Now, the other thing is what are the causes for reduced borehole yield? So what are some of the causes that basically are able to cause a reduced borehole yield? And one of those ones is mechanical blockage and the fine-grained soil materials or corrosion by products. So we're able to find that the fine-grained soil particles or corrosion by products that basically originate from metallic borehole parts can enter the borehole through the screen and reduce the water flow from the aquifer into the borehole. And again, also the other thing is the chemical infestation. So sometimes because we have certain chemicals existing in the well or in the borehole structure, so we are likely to see iron, manganese oxides, calcium, magnesium carbonate, and sulfate, which are basically chemical blockages or incrustation that is ensures that there is deposition of minerals on the borehole screen or on the gravel pack, which basically act to restrict the movement of water into a borehole. And then the third and the last cause is either also what we call bacteriological plugging. Iron normally has what we call iron bacteria, and at times also these bacteria, these microorganisms, basically also cause clogging problems in boreholes, in pipelines, and also in treatment facilities as much as possible. So some of these microorganisms, such as these bacteria, will definitely be able to bring about the clogging problems for boreholes, for pipelines, and also for the treatment facilities. So in terms of borehole rehabilitation steps, so one, it is always, when you embark on rehabilitation of a borehole, it's always good to make sure that you are able to notify all the users. So it's good to make sure everybody who uses the borehole well is asked not to drink the water, because while the strong solution of chlorine is present in the system, and to make sure that they store sufficient water for use during the period of rehabilitation. And again, also, it is important that we are also able to determine the characteristics of the well from the community. That is, what is depth, what is the diameter, that is how deep is the well, was the well originally, and what was the former yield of the well in comparison to the current one. So that's something that we actually need to be able to check and ensure that we are able to determine the pH level. Ideally, the pH will always be 7 or less. Then thirdly, it is also good to make sure that we are able to remove the pumping mechanism or lifting device and undertake any repairs. So it's good to make sure that the head walls, the drainage curtain, the sanitary seal, the cover, the lifting device are basically are repaired to make sure that we can actually be able to have a very clean waterway. Then the other thing is also to make sure that we are able to remove all polluted water, sediments and debris from the well, because for the dug wells, you can always be able to use either buckets or pumps for removal. And for drilled wells, there are basically a number of ways to ensure that we are able to remove some of those things, like for instance, using the over pumping technique, the surging technique, and also the jetting techniques. And again, also repair the damage in the inside of the well, because for dug wells, deepen the well, undertake localized repairs to the well lining, and also consider realigning so we can reduce the subsurface contamination. Then again, also, it's also good to make sure that we can be able to clean the well physically, because for dug wells, cleaning the well lining manually using a brush and chlorinated water, it's very, very critical. Then again, also for drill wells, it's always good to make sure that we clean the well casing and also the screen by using a brush or by using jetting or surging techniques that are also basically applied for well development. Then again, also clean the well chemically if necessary. That is the types of chemicals that were selected according to the type of contamination. These selected chemicals are basically placed in the well and are normally agitated frequently for 24 to 72 hours. And the well is then dewatered to make sure that it is able to remove all these chemicals. Then again, also it's also good to disinfect the well. And one of the most common methods of disinfection, as we all know, is chlorination. The chlorine compound that is normally used is normally high strength calcium hypochlorite, that is HSCH, in powder or in granular form. It will basically be able to contain 60 to 80% of chlorine, and very, very strong chlorine. So it's good that we make sure that contamination does not end up being consumed. So it's important to make sure that we are able to take care of that. Then it's also important to dewater the well, where we can operate the pump until all chlorinated water is removed. And if you have a chlorine test kit, you can actually be able to check the residual chlorine concentration in the water, and this should be reduced to 0.5 milligrams per liter. Alternatively, pump the water until it no longer smells of chlorine, because sometimes chlorine is, well, you can actually be able to see chlorine in the water. Then again, also, the other step is to seal the top of the well using a sanitary seal made up of layers of clay, and ensure that you're able to construct a drainage apron and then a head wall around the well to prevent surface water, insects, and rodents from entering the wall. And then you can also be able to ensure that you provide a cover for the well as well. So, so it's good to make sure that we are able to look at that particular challenge. Now, the other thing that we slightly want to be able to look at briefly is the issue of the role of behavior change in WASH interventions. Some of the things that are critical to make sure that we are able to basically focus and maximize facilitating the determinants of behavior and minimizing the deterrents. Should always be able to be things like the goal that you want to achieve. When you're looking at this community, basically what would you want to be able to achieve at the end of the day? Then secondly, what activities will you want, what activities will actually be able to be helpful to make sure that that we are able to achieve that particular goal, and also the resources that you will actually need to support those activities also become very, very important to make sure that we are able to look at that. Then the schedule for the activities also becomes very, very critical to make sure that we are able to look at the schedule for those activities. Then again, also is the means to evaluate the effectiveness of the activities also becomes important to make sure that we can actually on the effectiveness of the behavior change communication activities. Behavior change is a critical thing in WASH interventions, and I think it's very, very important, particularly in the component of hygiene in WASH. It's very, very important that we are able to focus on behavior change. And so behavior communication is simply communication that is intended to make sure that we are able to help individuals change their behavior and also ensure that they are able to develop more healthy practices as expected. And in a lot of WASH interventions, you will always find yourself being able to look at behavior change communication. So it attempts to bridge the gap between factual information and a person's knowledge and attitude. And the approach basically addresses the knowledge, the attitudes, the practices, and the skills of individuals as they relate to the specific WASH project program goals that you are trying to look at. And this basically helps us to be able to ensure that the targeted individuals are motivated so that they can ensure that they're able to develop more positive, more healthy, and more protective practices as much as possible. And some of the behavior change interventions to hygiene and sanitation is like, for instance, it is good to be able to organize around behavior change communication, that is promoting child-friendly pit latrines in households and also water treatment at the point of use, also hand washing with soap, and proper household water treatment and safe storage and disposal of wastewater. Some of those things become very, very important to be able to look at. And then again, also the issue of social change communication that basically aims to be able to increase community involvement in selecting appropriate design options for water and sanitation facilities so that we are able to change cultural beliefs and also ensure that be able to promote community-led total sanitation. So, and then another behavior change intervention is social mobilization, where you are able to bring stakeholders together so that you can be able to agree on what are some of the best social marketing strategies for water, for sanitation, for hand washing, and also for utilization of locally available materials for construction of sanitation and hygiene facilities as expected. Then beyond social mobilization, you can also be able to consider advocacy as well, which basically uh, aims to persuade decision makers to reduce the cost of clean water provision, and also to promote girl, child, and disability friendly wash services in schools, so that we can be able to improve maintenance of the water points as expected. So those are some of the behavior change interventions that you can actually be able to use. So we've spoken about behavior change communication. We have also been able to speak about social change communication, and this works very well, particularly when you're trying to implement, when you're trying to change cultural beliefs and also promote community-led total sanitation, that is CLTS. That is so was very, very good. That actually becomes something that we can actually be able to look at. So the other thing that I just want to make sure that we are able to look at, it's basically ensuring that we can be able to look at how to be able to write our academics assignments using the APA formatting. And simply, I just want to highlight some of the critical things that are very, very important, because we've been marking we've been marking some of the assignments, and one of the things that we've been observing is that sometimes we have instances where people are not able to pay attention, and they are able to ensure that they are not able to apply APA formatting. And we just want to also highlight a few things about why we insist on the APA formatting. So anytime you hear us telling you about check on APA formatting, we basically meaning the American Psychological Association citation style, which is normally the commonly used format for manuscripts in the social sciences and largely in the academic sector. And it actually regulates a number of things. So it regulates how your writing stylistics are. So it conditions you to be able to write in a particular way. How you do your text citation also become very, very critical, and also how you are able to do your references. So it becomes very, very important to be able to look at. Now, in terms of the writing stylistics, one of the things that we always emphasize when you're writing is if you have to use personal pronouns, basically use them where it is appropriate. For example, it is always good to say the author has instead of saying I have or I am saying, So it's better to be able to use non-personal pronouns. And then again, also, it is also good to make sure that you write more clearly if you use the active voice for verbs rather than the passive voice. And although it is always not always appropriate, but active voice should always usually be your first choice. For example, in the example shown below, you can see a guy saying Chu and Yang in 1991 were able to show showed that these agricultural reforms have led to increases in both agricultural production and productivity. And again, also Wheeler still claim that this increased productivity increased released labor for emerging rural industry, notably town and village enterprises. So using showed rather than have been seen enables us to see clearly who was able to see that the reforms were successful in that particular reference. Now, the other thing is that it is important also to make sure that the language in the APA paper basically is considered to be very, very clear, is also considered to be very, very specific in terms of the descriptions and explanations. So it's something that is very, very critical to consider. And again, also ensuring that you can be concise, so you don't have to present a lot of information unlike necessary. And I think I want to emphasize this issue of conciseness because sometimes we are marking, and I realize that a lot of us are giving a lot of unnecessary information that does not answer the question. So make sure that you are very, very concerned about ensuring that your information just keeps to answering the question. First, understand the question, then make sure the information that you generate there is concisely to make sure that it can always answer the question. So then again, also ensure that you use simple, descriptive adjectives, and also minimize a lot of figurative language. And then again, also in terms of the general formatting, I think it is good that we ensure that our essays are always typed. At least we have not seen somebody who is trying to present us written ones. So you guys have done some good effort to make sure that you're able to type your work. I think also some people might need to be able to understand how to double space their work in the standard paper size. So it's always good to make sure that you can double space your lines. And the reason why we insist on this is to make sure that it becomes very easy for me as your instructor to be able to read those assignments and understand them. Then again, also use one margin on all sides. And these are things that you can preset on your Microsoft Word. And then also always make sure you use font size 12. Always, this is what is regarded as the right format for academic assignments. And also, if possible, please make sure you use Times New Roman as your font. Again, your essay should just include 3 major sections. So when I pick your assignment, one of the things to first of all confirm, have you put a cover page? And cover page should have your name, should have your course, and should also have the name of the institution that you're submitting, and also you are submitting that assignment to who, that is to your moderator. It's always good to make sure that you are able to have that. Then again, also the body of the assignment should be used to answer the questions. So always list the question that you're answering and then type down the answer. It becomes very, very important to be able to do that. And then lastly, because most of your answers will be generated from certain materials, so ensure that you reference and you include in-text citations as guided by, as basically guided by the APA formatting. So so it's good to make sure that you present the cover page in a good format, and as we are showing there, that you're able to center the contents of the cover page. It becomes very, very important. In the main body, make sure you number the first text page of the main body as number 1. Type and center the title of the paper, centered at the top of the page. Then you type the text double spaced with all sections, then identify the sources that you use in the paper, parenthetical in-text citations. That becomes something that's very, very critical. And then if you have some tables and figures, make sure you're able to have some titles for your tables on figures that you actually use. Then for references, you center the references as you can see in that page that I'm showing you there. And then it's always good to make sure that you double space the reference entries and also flash the left line of the entry and the subsequent lines. So it's very, very important to make sure that you're able to do that. Then you can order entries alphabetically by the author surnames as expected. So that's one of the things that we definitely need to be as we are presenting our assignment. So so it's always good to make sure that you heed to those instructions as much as possible. But basically, that's what I really wanted to highlight in today's sessions. And I think that, I hope the audio served me well. And I hope that you have been able to hear me very, very clearly as we were going through. But thank you as well for following through the presentation.